Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to another session of Agile testing and automation. I hope your week is started well. I'm Eric Amagodwin, and I'm just going to be taking you through this session. So, okay, the previous session we looked at fundamentals of testing, test planning. We looked at test monitoring and control. We looked at aspects of organizational test process, and then we also looked at objectives of testing and test metrics. So with fundamentals of testing, that part 2 is what we're looking at today. Fundamentals of testing, part 2. In there, we'll be looking at traceability metrics. We'll be looking at test analysis. We'll be looking at test design and test implementation. I mentioned before, and I'd like to mention this, that the early sessions, the first 5, the goal is to lay some foundation from the traditional view before we go into proper agile testing. So these are test activities that we are looking at. Previously, I've mentioned what we looked at. We're looking today at test analysis, test design, test implementation. I mentioned we'll be looking at traceability metrics, but what is traceability metrics? It is a 2-dimensional table which correlates 2 entities. So you may have, for instance, it may correlate requirements and in test cases. So we will be looking at an example. I have to say here that I won't be spending too much time on requirement traceability metrics, but I will be giving some example on it. It's just by the way. Okay, so we've got, which you can see a column. There's a column for business requirements, and then design documents. Right. There are 3 types of traceability metrics. It's 3 types. There's the forward traceability, there's backward traceability metrics, and bidirectional traceability metrics. And the difference is that forward traceability metrics kind of maps requirements to test cases, whereas backward traceability metrics maps test cases to requirements. And then the bi-traceability metrics does both ways. Okay, it combines with the forward and then the backward traceability. And as I said, I will show you an example which will help you to do this mapping towards the end. I had to just bring this in by the way, just so that certain things will make sense. Right. Test analysis. Test analysis. Test analysis is an activity that identifies test conditions by analyzing the test basis. We've talked about test basis before, like BRD, design specs, etc. So this activity kind of analyzes, it breaks down for instance, the test basis, for instance, BRD, into testable features, okay, into smaller features. This involves certain activities like, or at this stage, we analyze stuff like examining the test basis. We examine the test basis at this stage, and we evaluate the test basis and test items with the aim of identifying defects. We identify priorities. Just hide this. We identify and prioritize features and set features to be tested. So at this test analysis stage, we ensure that the features that we break for instance, requirements to, we prioritize them at this stage and set these features to be tested. It also tells us that these test conditions can be tested at this stage. We also define and prioritize test conditions for each feature. We capture bidirectional traceability at this stage as well, right? One of the entry criteria for test analysis is that there must be a test basis. There has to be, for instance, requirements and user stories and stuff like that for test analysis to begin. Secondly, there has to be the test basis must have passed review. You want to make sure that these test bases are reviewed before you start test analysis. And then thirdly, there has to be an approved budget and schedule available to accomplish the remaining testing tasks for test analysis. This is important because, as I said last week, most people think testing is all about execution. Execution is just a part of the testing process. So it is important that the project assigns time or approves budget and then schedule time for this kind of activity, for test analysis to be done. Test design is an activity that derives and specifies the test cases from test conditions. So after you've got your test conditions, you need to break them into smaller chunks, as in convert them into test cases. And the activities at this stage, or the activities involved here, include examining test conditions and breaking them into testable chunks. I've mentioned that before. You also want to determine which test areas low level and high level test cases are appropriate. So when you're breaking test conditions into test cases, you want to separate them and decide which ones are low level test cases or high level test cases, and which ones should be low level or high level test cases. And then the third one is this stage we also determine and choose the appropriate test techniques, different techniques that are involved in the testing that we do. So you decide which kind of technique is appropriate for whatever you're testing. So determining and choosing the appropriate test techniques that will enable the necessary test coverage to be achieved. Another activity here in the test designing is using the test techniques to design test cases and sets of test cases. You also want to identify necessary test data. This is quite important because when you identify, or when you find the right test data, the right test data kind of detects bugs easily. So test data is critical in test designing, and that's quite important. Okay. Point 6, designing the test environment. Again, in test designing stage, we design the test environment. It's important to know what kind of environment you need, depending on the nature of whatever you're testing. If it's APIs, you need the right environment and the right tools, etc. for it. Or maybe it might require database testing, you need the right environment set up for them. So at this stage, testing has to ensure these are ready. You also identify, in test design stage, we also identify the necessary test data. That's a repeat there, so you can ignore that. At this stage as well, we also capture bidirectional traceability between test bases and then test cases, and I said vice versa. Okay. Test implementation, which is the third test activity that we'll be looking at. Test implementation. This activity prepares the test where needed for test execution. So after you've got your test, you've done your test analysis, designed everything, you need to kind of prepare all of these. Technically, you're converting these into tests, making them ready for execution. That's basically what this is about. The activities here include creating test execution schedule. Of course, you want to schedule when these tests will be executed, the appropriate time, when developers finish what stage. Do you want to do, system integration first, or do you want to test APIs before the UIs come in, etc. You want to decide all that, and then you want to identify and create that kind of schedule at the stage. You want to allocate resources. What kind of testers do you need? Do you need automation test resources? Will you need developers help at any point? Do you need technical testing resources, or just people who will execute the test cases, etc.? So what kind of resources do you need? Are you going to need some expert ones like performance testers? All these are defined in this stage. You also organize tests into manual and automation test suites. Also define test execution. We also define the order in which tests have to be executed. So remember, we have to prioritize these test cases. So the ordering means that you want, let's say, for instance, you want business critical test cases to come first, or this is a good place for you to consider the risk analysis that you've got, and bring in the high risk test cases, or test cases that will cover some of the risks depending on the risk levels. At this stage, when you're designing the test cases as well, you create and identify candidates for test automation. By candidates, I mean, test cases. You create automation test cases here. And you also finalize your test data and test environments. Make sure you've got all that ready and in place. And then you also develop test procedures. And finally, in this stage, you want to update traceability between the test basis and then testware. And by that, we mean you want to be able to map your test conditions to test cases, or you want to map from, if you're going forward, you want to map requirements to test conditions to test cases, etc. Or, do the reverse of that, right? I've got an exercise here for us. I know. I've got an exercise here for us to look at, just to help us bring, and I will explain these anyway, to bring stuff into perspective. I've got a requirement here which says allow users to log into the system with username and password. What I want from us is, what are some of the questions? Please feel free to put in the chat. What are some of the questions that you will be asking yourself? Because this is what any test analyst will be doing at analysis stage. What are some of the questions that you will be asking yourself? Please feel free to put that in the chat. Or yeah, if you were going to be testing this, you've got this requirement, what will you be thinking? Feel free to. Okay, I've got, what are the acceptable characters? Please. Okay, what are the tests that the system should accept letters and numbers? Where are we talking about? What is the character length? Where? So please fire away. I just want some interaction here. Does the user have an account? Interesting. Okay. Identification of test conditions. Come on, let's have some fun. Somebody just write whatever anything that comes to mind. How many? Okay. How will the system handle errors? Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Right. I think I missed one. Um, do you have to register before signing in? How would will the field respond to characters entries? Okay. So I'm going to give us some examples, some of the things that we'll go through that anyone will be thinking of. And thanks for your responses. They're all very useful. And yeah, okay, cool. Right. I'll give us a couple of them here. So what questions will a tester be thinking of? This is, just look at this as my rough sheet, okay? Rough sheet. One of the questions that will come to mind is where exactly, which page should this functionality live? Is it going to be on the last page or where? So it would be good if the business requirement document or the test basis specifies this. So when a tester is about to start work, we're doing our analysis, we look at the test basis and we start asking all kinds of questions. That is why at a point, I think I mentioned that there has to be, one of the entry requirements for test design is that there has to be a test basis and it has to be reviewed, okay? So where exactly should this functionality live? And then we also want a definition of the user. Who is the user? By saying that, we mean who's a valid, are we talking about valid users only or invalid users? People, and where can this be found? So that points us to data. All these come into our analysis and design, design stages, okay? And then this in turn drives a refinement of the requirements. And so you can see a clearer one here, which I've named the BR 1.1, a new version of the business requirement document. I just want to say this, that these are all testing activities. That is why I said before from day one that testing is a process. It's not just one activity. So these questions drive a refinement or a review, a refinement basically of the test of the business requirement document, right? So you can see a revised version allow registered users to log into the system with username and password on the login page. Registered users kind of tells us clearly, it kind of defines who a valid user will be. And then this, from that point, once we've got a clear requirement or test basis, we've got our test condition, we can go and break this into test conditions, right? Or high-level test cases. And then you can see examples of some of our high-level test cases here. The first one is the user with valid username and invalid password will not be able to log in. So you can see from just this BR 1.1, a test analyst will go and break this into test conditions. Someone may treat this as a test case, the first one, TC1, as a test case. Others may treat it as a test condition, depending on the level of testing that you're doing. Okay, so if we want to call, let's treat this as a high-level test case. A high-level test case, one says user with valid username and invalid password will not be able to log in. We also want to test that the user with invalid username and valid password will not be able to log in. And then the third point, we can see here that user with valid username and valid password will successfully log in. There's more that can be tested depending on several other factors. Okay, so you can see here that I've got high level. I mentioned high level test cases. There could be low level test cases that will look at smaller details, like when the examples were given, someone mentioned the fields, the kind of characters that will go into the field. These kind of drive automation test cases. So this is where you define low level and high level test cases, right? Let's say a bug is picked up. A user with invalid password successfully logged in. A user with invalid password successfully logs in. What any tester will do, oh, we thought we tested everything. So this will make a tester go back and do a traceability, or go and look at their traceability metrics and attempt to trace the bug back to from test case. You can see, oh, sorry, you can see the testers tried here to trace the bug back from test case 1. They've done it forward, but then you could do it the other way around and say tc2.tcn. TCN1 simply means test condition. That's just my way. I didn't get enough time to put this together properly, but I could trace this test case TC. Oh, okay. Even better, we could call this bug 1. Yeah, I could make this as an exercise actually and say, if you were to trace this bug, if let's say this is called bug 1, how will you trace it back to the requirement document? I was going to make this an exercise, but time didn't allow me. But yeah, so just with that bug, you could just label that bug as BG1, bug 1, and then trace it back all the way to the test condition, test case, test condition, and then to the business requirement document. So this brings me to the end of the session. I wish I had enough time. If this was a testing training session, I will break it down further, but I hope this was clear enough. Thank you very much. And I have to mention here that the next session we'll be looking at risk-based testing. We'll also be looking at test execution. We'll be looking at evaluating exit criteria and reporting, and then test closure activities. On that note, I'll bring the session to an end and allow questions and answers and feedback, of course. Thank you. Yeah. Whilst you're doing the question and answers, I want to say this, that it will help me a lot if you give me feedback on the pace. So am I cramming too much in each session or not? It will help me to kind of decide how much more or less to bring into the next session. So thank you. And I'll stop talking now.
Thank you, Eric. My name is Joseph. My first impression is that I thought you did very well.
Thank you, sir.
The presentation was fine by my own assessment. Having said that, one or two questions I wanted to ask. Number one, will you be making these presentations as slides available to us on request? Is this something you are willing to do? That's number one. Then number two, in defining the criteria for determining how to organize test cases into manual or automated test suite, how do you determine that criteria? How do you now decide which one you are going to test manually and which one will be tested automatically? Please pardon me for that word. Yeah, I'm sure you understand what I mean.
I do understand what you mean. Okay, so this is I want to be careful not to go ahead of ourselves, because this is part of a session that is coming up. It's a session on its own. So I will be coming up when we step into the agile side of things. But there are definitely criteria that drive this.
Okay.
I don't want to get into that part of things, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. And then the first question, will you be making the slides available?
It will be available. I think William always makes it available on the platform.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.
Hello, thank you for a great session.
Thank you.
Really enjoy it. My question is, will the recording be made available? I don't really know where the recording are stored. I don't know whether it's available on the platform.
Yes, again, I think this is usually recorded. It's being recorded at the moment anyway. So this will be put on the platform as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, thank you very much for the session. I found it very informative and insightful. I just wanted to ask, maybe would there be maybe possibilities of adding maybe examples? So for those of us that are not actually in practice, so that way we get a better picture.
You know what? Yeah, forgive me for that. I wanted to. This is why I asked the question about feedback, because I feel like I wish I could put more in. I'm just conscious of how much time I have for all the sessions going forward, and the level of details to put in. But yes, I think I've done that in the past, and I can put more examples in. I was just trying to gauge if you start putting a lot of examples in, will we not miss the facts and the important bits? But yeah, I will put more examples in.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you so much.
If there's anything in particular that you want examples for, please put it, DM me or put it in the chat or on the platform, and then I'll push one out for
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Hello. I just want to ask that when you are mapping requirement to test case, do you use the same test case ID to map the requirement, or you use the test case ID separate and requirement ID separate?
No, you want to use the original one. Yeah. You want to use whatever this is in the system.
Okay.
Use the same test case ID, bug ID, the requirements ID, and there are some tools. The good thing about, I didn't get to mention this, but there are places where you have to specify tools, and the reason is that today there are tools that make it easy for you to trace back to requirements, like Azure DevOps. When you link the bugs to the requirements, etc., for instance, it helps to do this traceability stuff for you. It helps to trace back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Eric, can you please explain the difference between test cases and test cases for me?
So, just to make it simple, the test basis, for instance, could be your requirement document. Okay, we did test basis previously. It could be your requirement document, but your test case is what you're actually testing. So it's a broken down version of the requirement itself.
Okay, so more like you develop the test case out of the test basis.
Let me go back to one of the slides. I think I gave some examples here. I'll go back to okay, so can you see this screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so for instance, you've got a test case. TC1 is a test case, right? User with valid username and invalid password will not be able to log in. That is come from your BR1. So BR1 is what the business requested for, but then you then break it into smaller chunks of features or testable features, which becomes a test case for you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions, please? I'm just looking on this. Is there any question that I've missed? No, I can't see any. No. Okay.
I would like to ask a question, please.
Yes, please, go ahead.
When you're writing your test case, do you
Yes.
write it at the same time you are doing your testing, or after you finish doing your testing, that you map the requirement to test case, or when you are doing your testing?
So ask the question again, just so that I can.
I mean, what I mean is that the
Yeah.
requirement document, the traceability document, when
Yes.
is it immediately while you are doing your testing, you are writing it at the same time?
Well, ideally, you want to do that. Yes.
Okay.
So when you write your test case, let's say once you've written your test case, like I said, there are some tools that make it easier for you. If you're using Excel, then yes, you can do that then. But at the same time, there are tools that make it easy for you to, because what you want to do if you're using the tool is if the tool allows you to link the test case to a requirement.
All right. What type of tool is that, please?
There are different tools that allow you. Let's say Azure DevOps allows you to do that. I can't remember all the other testing tools, to be honest, but most of the test designing tools that I've used allow you to link the test case back to the requirement, or even a defect back to a test case.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Or even the example of Excel sheets that I put on the that I showed earlier on. You will see columns. You will see columns. When I share this, you will find columns that map link to the test case or vice versa. All right. So thank you.
Eric.
Oh, hello. Let's do
hi, sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. I can hear you. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Yeah, sorry. I think I've just changed my laptop. Yeah, I've just changed my laptop. I'm just struggling to connect to my mic. So this is my first session. I haven't attended your earlier sessions.
Okay.
Maybe you might have answered my my question. So basically, as you mentioned, I think you might be covering in your future sessions about test-driven development.
Yes.
So I'm thinking how a user story will be break down into test-driven development before it goes to developer, and that would you be able to cover? Are you planning to cover it?
Well, we'll cover that then, but then this again comes in the test design stage. So at this point, you identify the candidates that you section them into high level or low level test cases, and then the low level test cases are smaller units or smaller details.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, for a technical tester, I will at that point discuss that with the developer, share that sort of stuff with developer. But then, yes, we will cover that when we come to automation.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be doing BDD, ATDD, and TDD.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've not stepped into the Agile side and automation side. I think we'll do that after the next session. So
yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. I think we've gone with 3 minutes behind ahead. Are we behind or we're 3 minutes behind schedule? So I'll bring the session to an end here. And thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully catch you again same time next week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Keep an eye on the platform for other sessions as well.
All right.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much, Eric.